happy. All right, let's take a look at fight preview. Chris Weidman versus Jacare. UFC 230. At the time where Mark and I are sitting here, this is coming up this weekend. I don't know when you watch this, but it's a great one. Weidman is a brilliant martial artist. If you listen to the podcast, I was talking about Ben Askren and the American nature of wrestling, because that Midwestern wrestling, there are incredible wrestlers in Iran and in Eastern Europe and all over the world, but Americans, there's a heart of America that loves wrestling. Chris Weidman is a real talented wrestler. Started out with a talented base as growing up wrestling, but he's a fighter. He's a martial artist. He's an athlete. He's a good man. Chris, good man. And this in New York City, being there, they're going to love Cormier. They're going to love Derek Lewis. Who doesn't love Derek Lewis? But they're going to love Chris Weidman. He's going to come out from that region with the USA flag draped over his shoulder. It's going to be amazing. We'll talk a little bit about what makes him special. We'll look a little bit at his history, too. It's not always something I do, but I think there are some interesting things about Chris Weidman if we look historically at what he has done in the past. There's a lot of reasons that's not the primary look often, because the past doesn't always dictate the future. And then, of course, Jacare. Chris Weidman is the Jacare of America, or Jacare is the Chris Weidman of Brazil. He's a very incredibly respected man, anchored in their martial art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but has become a brilliant martial artist. And these two together, it's short notice. I would tend to think that's not as big of a deal for Jacare, who's a lifetime martial artist. A quick story. I was at I competed in the Pan Am Games. It's now called the Pan Games in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Hermosa Beach. I think maybe around 2007. I actually, incidentally, in my division, blue belt, senior 2 or whatever based on my age and my belt and my weight, I got bronze, which was a good accomplishment at the time. It was one of the last tournaments I did before turning pro as an MMA fighter, and it was Saulo Ribeiro who is long been part of Jacare. They've been all connected. Saulo Ribeiro was the umbrella, I think, under which where I trained. He was the black belt that the umbrella was over, or the gym was under. And after that tournament, Jacare was there. And this is 2007, and this was California, but it's a Brazilian-based gym and school and collection of schools. Brilliant. Saulo and Shanji Ribeiro are brilliant. If you're not a jiu-jitsu nerd, quick search and you'll see how brilliant these guys are. And Jacare was there. And in 2007, maybe 80 people in this house. I think it was Saulo's, but I'm not sure. Big house in California. When Jacare walked in, it was, Jay-Z had just walked into the house. Like, what would be a good comparison? This was a superstar. Like a superstar had walked in the house. And these are black belts and purple belts and high level, and the purple belt competitors were often, the up and coming monsters. Brown belt guys are the guys who are basically black belts without a black belt. But the young, hungry, they went crazy for this guy. They went bonkers for this guy. And jiu-jitsu is very much a stoner sport. So if that sets the cloud, there was a very cloudy place, and Jacare comes strolling in, and literally everybody lost their shit. And that's 11 years ago. He's still revered in that way in Brazil and to people in the Brazilian jiu-jitsu world. And so it's a really interesting fight. But where do you go with it? To me, if we explore, Jacare's jiu-jitsu, we're not exploring Jacare's jiu-jitsu. We're exploring 2-year-old Jacare jiu-jitsu. We're exploring the last time he submitted somebody in MMA years back, and how brilliant he was. He's different. And it's the same with Weidman, So you have to look for something else to discuss. Weidman's last fight, 2017, so July. That is 14, 15 months ago. And it was Calvin, our buddy Calvin. They're so different now. What it's about now, and this is going to be the case with these guys. What it's about now is who's becoming a black belt in just the ability to perform. Weidman's worst performance, of course, is Rockhold. And he had 2 more losses since then. But his worst performance was Rockhold. And I haven't had a chance to talk to Chris about it, but he didn't perform. And this is a tricky conversation. And if you're wondering, I'm basically using this fight as a way to explore performance, or this matchup between these two classic gentlemen, very skilled fighters, as a way to explore performance, because that's everything. So Weidman against Lou Rockhold, you go watch it. And Chris has talked about this. You can find this. He talked about there is the moment where he throws the spin kick, right? So Chris throws a spin kick, and Rockhold catches him and takes him down. And I think that was in the 3rd round. Then he beats him senseless for a good couple minutes of the 3rd round, and then he beats him senseless for 3 minutes of the 4th round, and then takes him out. So bear with me for a second as we picture, if I was doing this as a breakdown on the old way, something we're going to get back to, but it's a story for another day, I would start there. In fact, come to think of it, I did do this breakdown. I did when Rockhold was scheduled to fight, or sorry, when Weidman was scheduled to fight Rockhold the 2nd time. I built this breakdown at Fight Network, completed it, voiced it, everything. It just didn't air ever, and I don't know where it exists. Maybe my friend still has it. Maybe he doesn't. I would love to see it. But I started at that moment, and I worked back. So I started at the moment where Chris spinning kicked Rockhold, and then worked back. Sorry. I started at that moment, showed the rest of the beating, and then went back to that moment and worked back. Why did we look at it that way? Because it is 18 minutes. Okay. Actually, Mark, I said I didn't need my whiteboard, but can you pass me a whiteboard? And the one right on the top, it's got writing on it, but that's okay. And there should be a marker stuck to one of the smaller guys. And if you take a quick peek, if any of them are clear, I'll take them. But if not, I'll... like stuck to the edge of one of them, to its side. Maybe not. Okay. No worries. Could be one on the table. Could be a black marker on the table or on the bookshelf. But regardless, if we find one, that's my fault. It's not Mark's. Normally I put those markers there for that reason. I'm just going to hold up my hands. 18 minutes. And the last, I'm going to say 3 minutes of round 3. It's not super important whether it's 3 or 2, and 3 minutes of round 4. Let's call it a 6-minute chunk. Chris never made a meaningful offensive or defensive, a key meaningful offensive or defensive move throughout. Thanks. So it says Ask Robin Black water on here. Can we wipe that off? We can. So I'm just going to do it as a timeline. Only for the... Also, I don't know if I'm going to take brain damage from licking this black marker. I'm just going to do it as a timeline. Round 1, 2, 3, 4. Obvious, right? There's our timeline. From this moment to this moment is one fight. And from this moment to this moment is another fight. So there's one fight. There's another fight. Does that make sense, Mark? Is that very...
Yep.
Round 1, 2, 3. Up until this point, there's one fight happening. There's an entirely different fight. We see this often. This fight that happened in this first one was a back-and-forth fight. Okay? So Chris lands this. Luke lands that. This happens and it's defended. It is a back-and-forth fight. I believe Chris won round 1 and round 2 was close. Maybe Luke won it. But either way, it was close. So for 2.5 rounds, we are seeing a particular fight take place. I'm going to turn this into a lightning bolt. Not super important. But this lightning bolt strikes. That is a spinning kick that Chris fucks up. And then we have an entirely different fight. One-sided. Luke beating, smashing, punishing Chris Weidman. See that lightning strike? What's that lightning strike, Mark?
Spinning wheel kick.
Spinning wheel kick. Why the fuck would that one thing give us 2 fights? Why? Why would it? And you've heard, and I'm sure we've heard Chris say this before, because Chris is incredibly self-aware. And when people are talking about these things, this is what I admire. So why do I admire Chris Weidman? Because I've heard him talk about this. He says, from this moment, there is no reason that it has to just go, they call it a snowball, or they call it, like, and this has happened to your boy, Conor McGregor as well, this moment, where all of a sudden, as he puts it, when in his moments, panic sets in or whatever. I don't think Chris would define it that way, but there is absolutely no reason that one screwed up moment takes you from an even fight to a complete destruction like that. And I'm meaning that as an admirer of both fighters and in a non-judgmental way, just in a this is what it appeared to be. So why did that happen? And again, you don't have to look too far. You'll find Chris commenting on this. Chris saying he should have been able to, at any moment, just right himself. So, again, I know I'm going to go into this a little deeper. I hope that was a good enough visual, and it was worth, Mark searching the entire house trying to find it. My marker that I lost. There is no reason that it's like this happens, but I blocked it, and then Luke tries to kick me, and I take it. One hurts me, I hurt him. This fight, because in that 2.5 rounds, Chris made a small mistake somewhere or didn't do it perfect, and so did Luke, and they were repaired, right? And please don't jump to conclusions on this. This isn't a one answer. This isn't a simple answer. This isn't, well, what happened? Well, this happened. It isn't. It's much more than this. And it wasn't, well, he was hurt or whatever. So after the lightning bolt hits of the missed spinning back kick, at some point Chris is taken down and he's hit. Well, every position is a battle. Okay? So first half of the fight, we have a battle on the feet. It's pretty even. I get a moment. You get a moment. We have a battle of position against the fence. Fairly even. Luke gets ahead with something, and me, Chris, and I'm talking from first person because I'm trying to explain it from what he faced, gets it back, right? He gets, Rockhold gets an underhook or something, gets an advantageous position. Chris gets that back, right? Because in every position, there is a way to win the position. Every position. If, I've got a grip here, but it's better for the coffee cup to get a grip out there and he can fight it, he's won that position. Every position has this. Every position has this. If we're standing against the fence and he's got an underhook and I don't want it, there may be multiple steps that have to be achieved, but I'll get my head into the right spot. I'll get my leg around the outside. I'll dig back in and I'll get it. Every spot is a spot where you can get it back. And you train something called worst case scenarios. Worst case scenario, somebody's on his neck, on my back, with an arm under here. If I'm calm, this is still just a battle. Of course, it's a battle closer to death or finish, but the battle is still just a battle. I must take 2 hands on his, get this. Okay, I did that. Now I got to get this down to here, and then I got to do this, and so forth. They're just battles. And at any time I miss a spinning back kick, and I get taken down. And even let's say it's bad, he's on top half guard. I can get back to guard, or I can fight to my feet. Or I can lose that position, and he gets mount. Now in mount, I can get back to half guard, or I can sweep him, or I can tie him up, and then get back to half guard. There's always a way. Each battle is a winnable battle. Every single step, and sometimes we get blown out of the water, and we're like, well, I couldn't win those battles. But that's not the case here, because this proved it. All of this proved that I'll win some battles and you'll win some battles. But after the lightning bolt hit, I lost every single one. Every last one. He's hitting me, and I'm trying to survive. And then, all I got to... it's as simple as getting back a half guard or locking up his arms or slowing the thing down. They're all battles. But then it went from a seesaw back and forth battle through 2.5 rounds to a complete, I can't win a single battle. I know it took a long time to get there, but I wanted to illustrate it in a meaningful way. Now, the reason I said don't jump to conclusions is if you're a conclusion jumper and you're more satisfied by finding the quickest, easiest answer, regardless if it's true, you'll say, yeah, that's because he was hurt and that was it. But I'll tell you, and I know that we're not talking in detail about who's a better striker or grappler or whatever, and that's just not what I do. Not here. So please stay with me if you're interested. If you're not, totally understand if you bail on this. Sometimes people will say, well, it's because he got hurt, and from there it was a foregone conclusion. Foregone conclusion's a valuable term. We're going to circle back to that. I'll tell you why that's not good, ever. And this is going to tie into your boy Conor McGregor here as well. And I keep saying your boy. I'm not trying to be condescending. I'm a big fan of McGregor as well. I'm also a huge fan of Khabib. And I can live in a world where I'm both of those things. I'm okay with it. I'm all right with it. Not everybody is. But McGregor and Renan Barão are two good examples of this. Renan Barão is one that is already been something. We showed what happened. McGregor is one where the answer is unknown. But once this happens, if you say, and Chris didn't, Chris went back and he said, I should have been able to win some of those battles to change the momentum. It didn't need to be a foregone conclusion where I missed a spinning kick and then it was a beating until I was done. That's not. Why did that happen? Chris had a mental letdown. Why is that valuable to know and to admit? Because Chris can fix it. And it may have taken him a while, or things changed with Gegard and Romero, whatever. And in Gegard, he had a couple of those too. I saw him that night, and Chris and I are friends, and I'm friends with his team. I really love all those guys. Mark Henry, who's part of his team, has become a very close friend. I was with them all after, and they were all sitting there that night saying, oh, this happened, and then that, and then this was unfair. I don't think they say that now. Because when you say, I had a mental letdown, you know why that's a relief? You know why that's valuable? Because you can go, oh, that was something I did. That's something I can repair. That's something in my control. Cool. Let's go deal with it. Let's go face it. Let's go repair it. Let's go try to improve it. If you say, that was unfair. I got hit. I was hurt. Something fucked up. And then, next time that won't happen. Next time it will happen. And why did I mention Renan Barão? Again, please don't think I'm knocking them. These are just examples that we have available to us. And they change. Renan Barão's changed many times over, and he will again. And he's faced other challenges, and he'll beat those two. But Renan Barão, in round 1 against TJ Dillashaw, gets dropped with a crazy right hand. Hard, brutal right hand, dropped. Complete sag, gets back up, fights for 4 more rounds, and gets blown out of the water for those 4 rounds. People that I know, in the months after that, as he prepared to rematch, there were people that I know, and they were not being dirty or giving me inside information or shit talking. They just were around that camp, and they said that they all were operating under the impression that that Barão got dropped bad, and that he was hurt and he wasn't in that fight. Next time it'll be different. And next time it was different. It was worse. Because they didn't go back and say, wait a second. No, it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't one shot. I wasn't concussed. Maybe you were concussed, but that's not the answer. The answer is, how do I improve? What can I control? What can I do better? How can I see it better? How can I perform better? And Chris took that from that fight. There's no reason that any fight ever has to look this way. Even lightning bolt hits, I can't do anything right for the rest of the fight. And Chris admitted it and has explored it now and I'm sure grown a great deal. And that was the case with Gastelum going in too. If Chris, and yes, Kelvin's smaller and all these things, but if Chris wasn't on 100%, people were like, well, Weidman's going to beat Gastelum. Yeah, unless Chris wasn't on. Unless he wasn't switched on and highly focused and tuned in to what it was, then Kelvin could beat him. Kelvin could beat him. But Chris was, and he beat him. And that's who Chris Weidman has to be in this one. it is what. Why did we go into Jacare? And I'm not trying to focus only on one guy. Sometimes my Brazilian friends are like, why do you ignore Brazilian guys? And then sometimes, Irish people are like, why didn't you talk enough about this Irish? Like, it's just it's just the way the conversation shaped. Jacare, when Calvin beat Jacare, and when Whitaker beat Jacare, big thing was mental. It was mental. And trust me, Jacare is firing up, mentally focused, ready to go always. But those guys didn't approach it with, I can't go to the ground. I cannot go to the ground. Or when that happens, like if one part of your brain panics, when Jacare has access to your back or he's laced against the cage, you go back and watch Whitaker. Jacare got him down, got him partially down, was grappling with him, had good positions, controlling him against the cage, partial down, etc. Never panicked, right? Because if you do, you're done. If you do, you're done. And that, I know it took a long way to get here, but that's what's going on here too. Can Jacare... And also the reason we don't just focus in on Jacare's wrestling is you go in there, this guy has landed some killer punches for years. I go back, Yushin Okami in 2013. Go watch the way he sets Yushin up. Just watch how he sets him up. He freezes him. All just ready to slip the power of Okami and answer back hard. And he makes sure Okami knows it, so Okami hesitates because Okami's ready to throw his power. Jacare is like going, throw it. He hesitated him so long that Jacare just fired it himself. I've got a breakdown on it from 2013. What is it, 2018? Yeah, so I've been doing these breakdowns for a long time, and I love them. I'll be doing them for as long as I live. You go back and look at that. And since then, I mean, the guy's landing shots on Gegard Mousasi. He knocked out Vitor Belfort. Yeah, of course we have to look back and say this is where he started. But when you're knocking out Vitor Belfort and you're landing shots, big, important, complex, smart, strategically set up shots in 2013, you can't be looking at that. So what do we end up with? We end up with level of performance is everything today. Guys like Weidman and Jacare, it's not wrestling versus jiu-jitsu. It hasn't been wrestling versus jiu-jitsu with these guys for half a decade plus. It's about who's going to perform right, and so much of it is that. So much of it is that. The guys who beat Jacare, the key to it, one of the extreme keys to it was don't, even for a moment, panic or become insecure when he's grappling you. Because if you do, you're done. And if Chris does, he's done. He's done. Because Jacare is just a monster. But you also cannot... Oh, I know when I said what happened with Barao, and he said, no, it wasn't, and it was worse. The reason I mentioned Conor in that is when you look at what McGregor said about his analysis of his fight with Khabib, a lot of it was correct and fair. Yeah, round one was pretty good. The part that is not, and the part that he needs to be very careful with, but that's understand still before I say, understand that there are many reasons McGregor would write these. A big part of it is because that's who he is, and he's looking for his own weaknesses and flaws. But another part is get fights, make money, get people talking, get you debating. So we cannot trust that what he's putting out is his real feelings. Very important. We start acting like that's his real feelings, we start acting fucking crazy, which is maybe what he wants, right? So, but if his actual feelings was he was blessed with that Khabib was just blessed with this big punch that changed the fight, well, if that happens to be true, then no problem. But it's not true. Khabib punched that guy in the fucking face and dropped him. Wasn't blessed with that. Wasn't some luck. Wasn't some fluke. Khabib trained hard to focus, to close distance, to not give away his right hand, to land it on a guy, to use, and you can say, yes, he was distracted by the threat of the wrestling, but that's who I am. I beat 20, and I'm not Khabib. I'm just putting it first person for the purpose of this. If I'm Khabib, I beat 26 guys. I beat them all a particular way that's in your mind. I earned that. It's not some mistake. The reason a guy would be concerned with my wrestling is because of what I fucking did. I earned that. So if McGregor looks at that right hand of Khabib says, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have fight. Well, that's a dangerous thing, as Henan Barrow can tell you. And that's that long, convoluted path was something I wanted to get to when we look at Weidman's mistake and how it didn't need to lead to that. And Weidman didn't say, I made a mistake, next time it'll be different. He said, I made a mistake, but I will be capable. I need to be capable of getting these mistakes back. And you do. You do. Unless you don't. And that a very next comparison for Weidman is Yoel Romero flying knee taking him out. You don't get that one back. So some mistakes, and we'll all make mistakes. Every fucking one of us. John Jones makes mistakes. Demetrius Johnson makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. You're going to make them, and sometimes you don't get them back. You got kneed in the face and he caved you in, you don't get them back. So
even the thing with Musasi, because that was the Big Dan's call.
Yeah.
The illegal knee. You can't get that back.
You don't get that back. Done. Yeah, but Chris, that was a performance issue for Chris too, and he admitted that. But you're right. You don't get those back. Yeah. But you should have got that one back. And those are the ones you need to get back. The difference between losing 5 fights out of 30 and 2 fights out of 30 is this very conversation. Because you're going to lose some. Sometimes guy's going to get you in the head with something, and you didn't even do anything wrong. He just did a lot of things right, and that's how it is. Of course, you'll still look for your weaknesses. How could I have been defensively more sound in that moment? You have to. This is life, not just fighting. It's life, and I'm not saying that because I'm trying to push people. I'm not a fucking motivational speaker. This is how I look at things. This is how I look at martial arts. I look at it and go, what can I learn? My life's imperfect. Well, our lives will always be imperfect. But what can we learn from the things that we study, the art, the music, the fighting, the whatever? What can we learn? And in this case, you're going to make some mistakes and you're going to have some setbacks and some failures. But if there's ones you can prevent, Chris could have prevented that one. And if and when it happens again, he will have learned from it. And he better, because Jacare is going to force you to make a mistake. And you have to get it back. Or else Jacare will defeat you in Madison Square Gardens. And, of course, that is part of the fear and the anxiety that the greats will deal with. The greats will deal with that because they can't control that. You can't control the outcome. You can control your preparation. You can control yourself and how well you perform and how well you deal with errors and mistakes and adversity. That's the long form of how we got there. And for those of you who are looking for a more conventional fight breakdown, I'm sorry, that's not what I do. I examine these things in hopes of finding something neat. And I hope we found something cool there. And I thank you for spending your time with me looking at Weidman versus Jacare in hopes that we learned something. Hopefully we did.